Here we are in week 4. Sorry about the very boring background. I'm doing this from the office here at the college, not from my house, so might look a little bit different. So this week we'll be talking about 2 chapters in anti-rock, chapters 8 and chapter 9. Chapter 8 very important because it discusses Alan Freed and the payola scandal, the habit of paying off the DJs to play certain songs. And then we'll talk about the death of rock and roll, what happened to Buddy Holly, Little Richard, Chuck Berry, Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis. Something happened to all these people and caused a quick death to early rock and roll in the 50s. A lot of advertising this week. We want to talk about Joe Camel cigarettes, Camel cigarettes with Joe Camel. Then next week we're going to talk about the Budweiser frogs and lizards, and then you're going to write a paper about that. And Stanley Kubrick films. Stanley Kubrick, we're going to look at our first Stanley Kubrick film, Dr. Strangelove. Later on we'll be looking at A Clockwork Orange and The Shining, all 3 Stanley Kubrick films, one of our greatest directors. I feel our greatest ever director. Also did Full Metal Jacket and 2001 A Space Odyssey. Stanley Kubrick, Dr. Strangelove, and also be discussing post-apocalyptica. What the heck is that? Post-apocalyptic movies, the apocalypse after the nuclear war. Really, post-apocalyptic movies could be after the nuclear war, after a huge global climactic environmental problem, after a huge bacteria thing. I believe the movie 12 Monkeys was about some kind of future world in which the world had been attacked by some kind of monkey-related plague. But we're really interested in post-apocalyptic movies in the sense of after a nuclear war, something that we were very concerned with in the 60s and 70s, and there's been a bit of a resurgence lately with a few movies, The Road, and my favorite, Book of Eli with Denzel Washington. We'll be talking about all that stuff, Dr. Strangelove, and post-apocalyptic movies as pop culture. Now what else? In-between groups, what we call the in-between groups. Why are they the in-between groups? In between Elvis Presley and the Beatles. Elvis Presley joined the Army in the late 50s, and the Beatles came around in 63, 64. So we had a certain period between Elvis and the Beatles where rock kind of fell on hard times and changed a little bit and got mellower. I'm going to adjust the camera here a little bit and adjust it one more time here. Oh, about right there. That looks pretty good. I get too much of my shiny head in there. Need to start powdering my head. How does that go? I'm going to go to the bathroom and powder my nose. The in-between groups between the late 50s and early 60s. And lots of strange music crazes happened. Dance craze, surf craze, girl groups with great big bouffant hairdos. And then the Gula book. We'll be looking at the Gula book. Where's my Gula book? Chapter 6, talking about numbers. How numbers can be very irrelevant and numbers can confuse us, and we'll be looking at a couple of ads. We'll be looking at a record album cover from Elvis Presley and also an ad for Electric Shave. Then we'll have our discussion forum on post-apocalyptic movies and a quiz. But what I want to talk about right now is the last week discussion forum. I was very, very happy with it, I thought the topic might be a little tough only for our second forum, but there were some really good ideas put forward on this idea of the evolution of music and the co-opting of black culture. So much of what we're talking about right now in this period through the 50s is that idea of white culture, black culture, Hispanic culture. Through the 30s and the 40s and early 50s, what was pop culture? Was there very many Hispanics or blacks creating pop culture? Not really, not in the mainstream, Every once in a while we'd have someone like Nat King Cole, but they weren't really, he was a big crossover artist, but it was pretty much very much a white culture, and that's what we're really seeing now is the breakdown in the mid-50s of this white culture dominance. We've got black musicians coming on very strong in the 50s in this big tug of war between the black music and the white performers with Little Richard and Pat Boone, and the black performers are getting more and more popular. And then Motown Records will be coming along. We'll be talking about that in a few weeks. Motown Records comes along in the very late 50s, early 60s, and really helps break down some barriers for black music. But we're also talking about the mixing of races, what the Hays Codes called a miscegenation. The Hays Code declared that there should be no mixing of races in the movies. So we also saw in Blackboard Jungle, the students in the class, look at the makeup of the students in the class. There are black students. Sidney Poitier, the lead student character, is actually the good student, the one who really leads the students and comes off as the strong leader. The bad kid is Vic Morrow's character. We'll be talking about Vic Morrow later, I hope. And Vic Morrow, very interesting, had a tragic death. Vic Morrow's character, who played Artie West, the bad kid, he was Irish, and the Irish were looked down upon at this time as a subgroup also. And there was a common sign at this time, N-I-N-A, Nina. You'd hang a sign that said Nina in your store if you were looking for employees. You'd help wanted, then you'd put N-I-N-A below it. This was common in New York City back in the 30s and 40s. N-I-N-A stood for No Irish Need Apply. So we think that a lot of times the whole immigrant problem has been directed at blacks and Hispanics, but other groups also got it, the Italians, the Irish, the Poles. So the movie Blackboard Jungle really does show a mixture of races, the blacks, the Irish, the Italians, and also, importantly, Morales plays the Puerto Rican. The character Morales is a Puerto Rican kid, so we also have Hispanics. So we have this mixing of the races in the movie at this time, even though the Hays Code was down on it. And again, in TV, the TV show I Love Lucy, we have Desi Arnaz, who was Cuban. So we have a Latin Cuban person, and obviously Lucy, a Caucasian woman. So this is a big topic here in the mid-50s, this mixing of the races that we're seeing in the music. The black artists are getting more and more popular. Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Bo Diddley, and we have certain DJs, Alan Freed in particular. Be sure you read Chapter 8 about Alan Freed. We have certain DJs who are promoting and championing the black music. They didn't want to. Alan Freed and certain other DJs didn't want to play the watered down versions done by Pat Boone and others. They wanted to go back to the originals and play the music of Chuck Berry and Little Richard and Bo Diddley. And this was very important for the advancement of music and for the advancement of black rights and civil rights. And so we've got these things happening in the mid-50s. The music, the movies, television, and all pulling us into the modern era. And then in the 60s, things really explode with civil rights, and Motown Records helps that along a lot. So dig into the discussion, dig into the assignment folder there, anti-rock, death of rock and roll, Joe Camel, some very good stuff about Joe Camel and cigarette advertising, Stanley Kubrick, one of our greatest directors, the in-between groups, the surf craze, the Ventures, Wipeout, the girl groups, the Shangri-Las, the Ronettes, the dance craze, Do the Twist, Do the Hully Gully, Do the Watusi, Do the Swim, Gula, Elvis Presley, and Electric Shape, talking about numbers and how numbers can affect our way of thinking, some critical thinking exercises, and a discussion on those post-apocalyptic movies. Hopefully I can find some clips from The Road or The Book of Eli, or some post-apocalyptic movies from a few years back, The Postman, or some of the Mad Max movies, or A Boy and His Dog. We'll be talking about that again in a few folders, and then don't forget about our quiz. That's it.